Hi everybody, was just chatting to Keeley from Trying to Be a Mum. It is International Donor Conception Awareness Day today, which is a very special day. Thank you to Jana Rapnow for pioneering this day, and there's 24 of us other partners who are a part, all doing different things to vocalise donor conception from both a donor conceived adult point of view and also an intended parent's point of view, or parents of donor conceived children. So hi to those who have joined. I think you're probably just with us. Keeley had some network errors, so let's just see if she... Oh, there we go. Okay, let's see if this works better. Bear with us. I'm going to add her in. Questions about sperm donation, egg donation, talking to children. She's not there yet, but I am, because baby Freddie is our baby. Hello, that's so much better.
Is that... Yeah, oh, sorry.
No
and then
worries.
Clearly Freddie started screaming, so...
That is so much better. So I'm sorry to ask you again, but
no,
please could
totally
you
fine.
reintroduce yourself to anyone who's joining? And we're going to talk about your journey with egg donation to mark this very special day.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm Keeley. I am now 43, and I gave birth to Freddie last summer. He was 10 months this week, which is totally crazy. And he was conceived through donor eggs. And the way, I guess, that we found ourselves on that path was my husband and I got married in 2013, and I was kind of 35.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the back of my head, I kind of was a bit conscious about just cracking on, basically. We both knew that we wanted a family. Sorry, I just ran up the stairs.
Don't worry.
We both wanted a family, and that we should just get on with it, really.
Mm-hmm.
So we started trying, and I always say kind of not that pissing on a stick every week sort of trying, but just having lots of sex sort of trying. And it just wasn't happening. And so about 9 months actually, we went to the GP and just sort of said, I think we need to just check that everything's okay, because we've been trying. I'm over 35. Like, we took a lot.
Were you worried at this stage? Did you think 9 months feels like a long time to have been seeing nothing?
To be honest, I didn't really know too much about it. Like, yeah. And also when you just go online, it just says if you've been trying for 6 months or more and you're 35 plus, go to the GP. So that's what I did. But I think you're always in that mindset of like, you don't think it's gonna happen to you. Like, I just thought, we'll go to the GP. She might say a few things. Maybe we'll, like, very sweetly, but as we know, probably very unhelpfully, friends tell you to, or like one of my friends just did Clomid, and she had a baby like 2 months later, and it's like, they'll put you on Clomid kills, you'll be fine. It's like, don't think they will, but anyway, thanks. So I think I don't know what we thought was going to happen, to be honest, but I felt like it was the right course of action. So we went and we had all kind of the baseline tests that GPs do, and their sort of diagnosis was unexplained infertility. Like, I had a slightly low AMH, but nothing, that's not necessarily an indicator to whether, as we all know, whether you can conceive or not. So So are
you 36 by this stage?
No, I'm still 35. So this was kind of, or maybe I was 36 actually. Yeah, I was 36. Sorry, because that was kind of the following summer. So after we got married. So yeah, I was 36, and they at the GP said that they would advise us to go straight to IVF. And again, to be honest, at the time, didn't even question it. I was like, and I don't think I really, and again, this is a kind of, I guess, an education piece for GPs, and which I know a few people that I know are trying to work on, is how they communicate that information to people. I didn't really know what the other options were, like it was, and I guess you do, you put faith in a medical professional to tell you what the right course of action is. And so, and again, I was pretty, like, it was shocking but not shocking. It was kind of, in the back of my head, I probably thought we were going to need a bit of help, but I didn't know what that help looked like. And I was just like, okay, cool, IVF sounds good. Like, let's get cracking. Again, thinking, well, it's going to work first time, obviously. So we started to apply through the NHS. So we got referred. But also simultaneously, we started looking into private clinics. And actually, by the time 3 months later, we had our NHS consultation. And then we were told it would be 18 months before we would have treatment, which meant I would be 30, going 38. And I was like, we can't do that. Like, we can't, which is a real shame, because we would have got 3 rounds on the NHS.
Really? Because of the postcode? Because of your postcode?
Yeah. And I was really surprised, because I live in London, and in a borough that is, I would imagine, quite oversubscribed. But we did. But it actually materialised that by the time that NHS appointment would have come round, we'd already done 3 rounds. So, right. So we went straight through into the private route, and to cut a very long story short, because we're here to talk about donor conception, not how, I ended up having 8 rounds of IVF, fresh IVF. We did 6 transfers, and 2 of the rounds were PGS testing. So we had 6 rounds in the UK. We did 2 rounds in Spain to do the PGS testing.
With your eggs? With
my eggs. And I think from kind of round 4, our consultant had kind of broached the donor idea, and had said pretty much, like, we can keep going if you can keep going, and it might happen, you never know, but your best chance is likely to be with egg donation.
After all the PGT for 2 of the rounds, did they ever find any reason why they didn't think that it was working, if, you know, the diagnosis had been unexplained infertility and your AMH didn't seem too low? Was there any kind of, I don't know, result?
No, I think, to be honest, I think in the end, it just came down to egg quality. And again, you know, that's the annoying thing about the only bloody thing you can't test for.
Yeah, it's just trial, isn't it?
Is egg quality, and one of the most predetermining factors as to what your outcomes are going to be. And I think just because of my advancing years, that wasn't getting any better. You know, even with someone with like optimal fertility, it's still not getting any better the older you get. So I think as time went on, it started to come down to egg quality. And we had a natural pregnancy between rounds 3 and 4, which was a total shock, and we miscarried. And then when we did PGS testing, both embryos that we tested came back abnormal. I kind of, in the back of my head, was like, there's got to be a reason for that. You know, like, it kind of rationalized my thought process in terms of how we move forward as well. That actually makes sense.
Yeah.
If we never had a positive outcome, like a positive pregnancy test with IVF, we got to test day, but it was always negative, and then I would bleed, and then it was, you know, so we just never had any results.
So sorry, you've gone a bit faint. Before they broached the subject of donor conception, using an egg donor, I think you said at round 4. How were you feeling each time you got the negative result from IVF? Because that is a lot of rounds to go through, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
How did you kind of keep going?
I think it was really tough, and I mean, in fact, I think the first few were tougher than the rest, because I think at that point you kind of set yourself up for disappointment. Like, I think the first couple of rounds I was really hopeful, like, it was like, oh, it's gonna work, and like, we'll have a baby,
and then it'll be next time.
And then it'll be next time, and then actually, when you start to be a little bit more rational about it rather than just totally emotional, which is really hard, and you realize the stats, and you kind of you know, I know a lot of people, I say this so many times, but like when someone tells you there's a 95% chance that something's not going to work, you'd never do it. Like your rational side of your brain would go, that's crazy, stop, like reassess, do whatever. But when someone says to you there's a 5% chance it's going to work, and it's something as emotive as having a baby, you're like, great, take 5%, you know, I'll take that.
Definitely.
So I think a bit of stubbornness. I'm not a stubborn person, but I think I was a bit like, I'm competitive. So I was a bit like, well, we'll beat it. Like we, you know, and also you believe in yourself. You're kind of like, well, we're pretty lucky in most respects. So there's no reason why this should be any different. Or, and I think
you almost want to control it, don't you? There's this feeling that like, if we keep persevering, something's going to change.
And again, I know a lot of people say this, but I think especially our generation of women, you're kind of taught to just like, if you work really hard at something, you can do anything you want, and you can achieve anything you want, and which is absolutely right. But this, you don't get a gold star, like if you know, like it's,
and you don't get a pat on the back for saying well done, you tried again.
No, exactly. And that's why also it's really important that when people, you know, that's why it's really important not to compare your journeys with someone else's, because just because I did 8 rounds, someone else might do 1 and decide that that is totally enough for them, because it's insane. It's brutal.
And I think that's actually the same with donor conception, isn't it? That it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
It can help so many people, but not everyone feels comfortable doing it for various reasons, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think the way that we kept going, and I think also, and the drugs didn't affect me overly much. I think as well because of my low AMH, I didn't get hugely stimulated, so it wasn't kind of, I didn't feel the hormones raging through my body every single time. So I think if I'd had perhaps worse reactions to it, maybe that would have, you know, we would have done less rounds, or but I was just kind of like, all right, well, I can do that again. Like, when's the next appointment? Let's kind of get on with it.
So what happened with so round 4, or after round 4, this one of the private specialists, I'm not sure at which stage you moved clinics, but how did they approach the subject of using an egg donor, and what was yours and Dwight's reaction to that?
So we did 2 rounds at one clinic, and then we did 4 rounds at ARGC, which is in London. I think most people have heard of it or know it. So it was our second round with them, after our second round with them. And I just had a really good relationship with the consultant, and I'd always turned to her and said, like, you just need to be honest with me. Like, I don't really want you to mince your words. Like, not that I pay you for your opinion, but I was like, I don't want to skirt around. It's like, tell me what the facts are. And we were having a debrief, a kind of negative debrief, negative result debrief. And we were just like, well, what are the options? And that was exactly what I just said. It was like, well, you can keep going, we can keep going, but really we feel like your best chance at having a family is egg donation. And it was as simple as that, to be honest. I know there's a lot of, I think because we'd been through quite a bit already, I think your brain is kind of set up to kind of receive that sort of news as well, if you know what I mean. Whereas I think maybe if that had been the first thing that I'd heard, I would have reacted very differently. Whereas actually my reaction was just like, okay, so what do we do? Like, how does that work? Like, what do we do? I think it took, and the reason we carried on doing rounds with my eggs is Dwighty wasn't quite there yet. And I think because I'd been thinking about it anyway, sort of in my subconscious a little bit, I think, he was just like, but if there's still a chance, maybe we should keep going. And so I did, and it was my choice as well. But I kind of was like, we were lucky that we could keep going and just tick some more off the list. You know, it's like, right, okay, well, we've exhausted that option. We've done PGS testing. We've done this test. We've done that test. And then, but when the PGS testing came back abnormal, we were supposed to do more than 3 rounds to try and get, because I got very low numbers in terms of eggs and therefore embryos, you know, out of 8, they want to get 1, don't they? So it's kind of like, well, that would have meant me doing another 3 or 4 rounds of egg collection. And I just turned around to Dwight and I just said, it's not going to get any better. Like, I just know it's not. And to have 2 of them abnormal in a row, I was like, I think we're done. And at this point, I'm 41 and I'm kind of like, I want to get on with our family. I want to get on with my life, basically.
Yeah, of course.
Which I think is really important to say, because I think a lot of people don't want to say things that sound as selfish as that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just felt like I spent the best part of a decade trying to have a baby, and it's a lot. It's a lot, yeah. And actually, it's okay to say that you just want to move on with your life in whatever way that means, whether that is deciding that you aren't going to have children or deciding that you're going to find another path to do it. And I just got a bit impatient in the end. And it affects your relationship as well. It puts so much strain. Well, I'm talking from my personal relationship, but definitely puts strain on our marriage. Just wanted to get back to having fun together and enjoying things. It just felt like we were on pause. Yeah, and then it's that whole thing, isn't it? Where you feel...
Sorry, you've gone quiet again.
Oh, sorry. I think I'm holding the back of the bottom of the phone. I think you also see other people. Again, it's not comparing, but when you've got really close friends that are, their life's moving on and yours seems like it's a bit stuck, and you aren't then doing the same things with them, because if they have kids, their kids are older. You know, some of my friends have 18-year-old kids, you know, like it's, I mean, they had kids quite young, but even so, some of them are like 7, 8, 9, 14, you know, they're out of this whole baby phase. They're totally gone, you know. So it shifts all your friends' dynamics as well. And, you know, I gave up that dream of having babies with my best friends like quite a long time ago. And actually, thankfully, one of my dearest friends actually had a baby like a month before I did. And it's just the best thing, because even though you kind of make all these new bum friends, there's nothing like having like one of your oldest friends going through the same thing as you are. And I just never thought I'd ever have that.
Through COVID as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A whole nother
just to throw another spanner into work. Jeez. So when you decided, right, let's go with egg donation, what was the process? What were the steps? And what were your choices and considerations at that point? Because you went abroad, didn't you?
We did, yeah. We went abroad. So, and the reason for that was because we didn't want, again, it was, you know, the slight impatient kind of side of it. We didn't want to wait any longer. We weren't quite sure how long the donor process would take in the UK. And being really honest, again, we wanted to know more about our donor. So originally we'd gone to Spain for our PGS testing because we were at IVI in Valencia, and we knew that they also did egg donation. So we were like, oh, well, if that doesn't work, then at least we're with that clinic and we don't have to go to another clinic, and we can just crack on with that. But actually, when it came to deciding that that was the path we were going to go down, and we stopped and kind of reassessed it and thought about it, we actually realised that we wanted more than the phenotype. You know, we wanted more than hair and eye and weight and height, basically, as our criteria. And that is totally personal decision, and everyone comes to those things differently. But that's what we wanted. And we also actually decided that we wanted to see pictures of our donor as a baby. And the 2 places that basically you can get, as far as I'm aware anyway, please correct me, someone, I know that your IVF Abroad is on here, so she'll probably be able to say, but is the States and Russia.
Yeah.
And
because like we saw pictures of our donor as a child. We've got pictures of our donor as a child that I sometimes look at to see the comparisons between him and the children. I can see it.
Really? Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting actually that you say it. I'll come on to that actually, because but yeah, because where did you go again?
America, New
You went
York.
to America, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and quite bluntly, America was 3 times the cost of Russia. And at this point, we've already spent, I would say, over 120,
Oh my gosh.
£110,000. And
It's so unfair, isn't it?
yeah, and I think it's really important to be honest about that as well.
Yeah.
That's we blew our life savings. We had help from family. Yes, we could do it, but in other ways, that's
Easy.
put us back in various ways as well.
Yeah.
And actually, even though what you get at the end of it is totally priceless, it isn't a bottomless pit, and finance does come into it, and it is a consideration. And a friend of mine had used Olga Fertility, which is the clinic that I was with in Russia, and had got pregnant on her second go, actually, and she had raved about it and said it was great. And so we just looked into it, and then the first kind of conversations that we had with them, they were super lovely, and we just decided to go for it. And it was kind of a bit of a weird, because I mean, it's Russia and you're a bit like,
were you put off by the fact it was Russia? Did you have like preconceptions about going there and what it would be like having treatment there?
It's funny, isn't it? Like, I think when you're doing donor, like, you have to have some quite weird and wonderful conversations with yourself about various things, like, and get over yourself a little bit in many respects, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of them as well. Like
broaden your horizons a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And just sort of, I think you do have preconceptions, and I think that's natural. And I think originally I'd said the States, because it's what I know. Like, I grew up there as a kid. I've pretty much been there probably every other year since I was born. Like, it's just familiar. You get it, like, it's, whereas I know nothing about Russia. Like, I just didn't know anything. But in a way, I found that quite sort of not
like
liberating.
A fresh start?
Yeah, and a bit of just interest and a bit of kind of, well, why not? Like, and I'm so glad we did, because it's now, I always used to say that we were like IVF tourists, like we kind of go wherever the good stuff is. But it's like opened up our eyes. We spent an amazing 10-11 days in St. Petersburg, and it was just a joy. It was lovely.
And did it work first time?
It did work first time, yeah. And I think which doesn't always happen. Sometimes it never happens, and I think it's as going into donor is with your eyes as wide open as you do with IVF. There isn't still a guarantee, but.
And how many embryos were created in that round?
So we got 6 embryos.
How many eggs had you got from the donor?
We got 10.
And did you share them with another family as well? Sorry, I'm firing questions.
No, not at all. No, we didn't. And that was slightly lower egg numbers than they thought that she would get. But we did a package where I think it was like you were guaranteed 4 blastocysts. And I was like, well, I only want 1. But that's great. So yeah, one of them that was transferred was Freddie, and then we have another 5 in the freezer in Russia. All pretty much the same quality as Freddie, I think.
That's a whole other conversation, isn't it?
That is a whole other conversation. So we were really, I mean, lucky, not lucky. I mean, lucky is a bit of a weird word, isn't it? But
yeah.
I think also when you go into it, like, it was a weird kind of bit like paradigm shift to get your head around. I don't know how you felt about it, but like, I found it really hard to get my head around the fact that I might actually get pregnant. Like, I think I'd gone through so many years of kind of expecting never to get pregnant, like, for it just not to happen. And then when the odds shift so much the other way, because like I think by our last round of PGS testing, we were like 2% chance with our own eggs, and with Olga, I think it was like 65 to 75% success.
Wow. But I think you're right. There's obviously those feelings from the trying to conceive point of view, but also if this happens and then you're pregnant, and whilst it feels, you know, everything you've wanted, it is also, I don't know how you feel, you know, with egg donation, but when I was carrying my children using donor sperm, there were there were like markers of the pregnancy which were like ups and downs. So my husband was grieving his genetics, and some of the scans and things like that, he found it really difficult to just the feelings were just sort of, I don't know, hormones, whatever it might be, the uncertainty of not knowing. From just having seen some pictures of our donor as a child, it felt like a big thing to be taking on in terms of how the children going to feel, what are they going to be like, what are they going to look like, what characteristics are they going to have, is it going to be nature or nurture, all of those things that I think can feel quite overwhelming, can't they? And it's not like, and I think those feelings live on, even when you're parenting donor conceived children, they shift, and I adore my children and couldn't imagine them any other way. But I always have this feeling of wanting to talk to them about it because that's what we've chosen to do. So a lot of opportunities, I'll think, oh, I haven't talked about it for a while, so let's start the conversation. And my 4-year-old rolls her eyes when I bring it up. She's like, not again.
Mom.
So I was like somewhere weird in the middle. And I know you're not there yet because Freddie's younger, but it's somewhere in the middle of kind of normalizing it so that they don't feel that there's this, if people want to tell their children, they don't feel that there's this big thing that they find out. And there's an article on Fertility Help Hub, lovely B has written about finding out she don't conceive later on in life and the repercussions that's had. So there's I'm somewhere in between wanting to talking about it openly, but also not wanting to focus on it so much that it's like too much.
Yeah.
Because you want your children to be happy and just, you know, not have a weight on their shoulders, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I don't think, like, I think you think about all of those things before you kind of go down the path. And you know, I totally hear you about, like, you know, obviously I was the other way around. It was egg donor. So it was, but it's the same things about, like, how do you, like, and being really blunt, and I've been really honest about this because I think it's the only way to be, really, is like, the resemblance thing was a big thing for me. My family have really strong genetics. Like, my niece and nephew look like me. Like, they, you know, and we always joke, it's like, oh, because my surname's Pratt. I know, it's terrible. Well, it was. Luckily, I was a girl and could get married.
You changed it.
Very not old-fashioned about it. But like, the Pratt genetics are strong, and I was like, I feel like that's quite hard to let go of. And, you know, I'm quite all the things that you would naturally think, you know, like, I'm quite sporty, like, what does that look like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then actually, I mean, Freddie just looks exactly like Dwighty, so I really don't, you know, it's kind of, even though I ticked the olive skin box on the egg donation, he's still got Irish pasty skin.
Well, that's another thing, isn't it? When you're doing the donor search, which can feel very overwhelming. And I talk about this a lot, that it's with different people. So same-sex couples maybe, and solo parents by choice, and then heterosexual couples who struggling with infertility. There are different feelings probably associated to selecting a donor depending on what your situation might be. And you're right. Some of the things that, like, were really important to us, totally out the window now. Like, my husband, it was eye color, and out of 3 children, 1 has blue eyes and 2 don't, and he was fixated on blue eyes because that's something he felt was really part of him. And then again, hair color, 1 of our children has red hair, so it's like, you just don't know what different characteristics are going to come from where, and you don't know that even with
biological children.
But exactly.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. And I think I think I kept going back to that actually a lot during the donor process, and just reminding myself that a lot of all the fears that I was thinking about, or not, I don't even like call them fears. I just think like just thoughts, really, because it wasn't like I was scared of them. It was just that there were things I should consider. You know, it was kind of like, and I know like fears is used quite a lot, but I think it can feel a bit weighty sometimes, like where, because I wasn't scared about it. It was just things that you needed to consider. And I think, but when I kept thinking about them, I was like, but surely every parent thinks about this. Like every person who's about to bring a baby into the world, whether it's themselves, through someone else, you know, whatever you think about, like every parent thinks about, you know, is my child going to love me? Am I going to bond with it? Am I going to, you know, when they're a teenager, again, they're going to shout and say, I hate you. And, you know, all of those things. It's just like every single person on the planet thinks that. And I don't think being donor conceived makes that any different. I really don't. And as you say, like, I think there were things that I thought about before that now just don't even enter my head. But I know that at some point, in fact, in my post today, I said that at some point, I think they'll resurface at some point. And that's not because I haven't reconciled myself with the donor conception process. It's just because you're human, and that's just human nature, and something will throw up that you didn't expect, or you didn't think you were going to react like that. Or, I mean, you've probably got a bit more experience than me in that regard, but then I just think, but again, is that any different challenge to a parent with a biological child? I just don't know, because equally I have nothing to compare it to. So.
I think the things that I've started to consider that I didn't think about so much during the IVF process were things like how many, I mean, probably more, definitely more with sperm donor, using a sperm donor, but how many half siblings there will be, or are, or could still be. And also, it's kind of weird, isn't it, not knowing the donor's name? And there are so many questions that are going to pop up from the children, like what's he called, where does he live, you know, about half siblings. And so it's like preparing yourself to have the language to support them with that. And I guess knowing that, like, long term, there could be discoveries, there probably will be discoveries of other relatives.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, I know there's a huge debate over anonymity and known donors, but I think the kind of tension between those two things does become less, particularly now, I think is less and less than probably it was 20 years ago, because the conversation's totally changed, and the way that people are advised to go into this is different. But equally, even though we chose an anonymous donor, I went into it with the knowledge that in 18 years' time, there's not going to be anything anonymous about any of us, let alone, you know, but in the same token, so as in, it may be much more easily accessible, even though they are anonymous, to find out, or to help Freddie find out who they are, if that's what he wants. Equally, I'm really conscious of the fact of respecting the fact that she chose to do that because it was anonymous. And I think there's quite a big thing there in terms of, you know, if it hadn't have been anonymous, she might not have wanted to do it. And I think that's really important, to respect her privacy as well in terms of that. And that's just up to us about managing those expectations of, you know, but equally, just because someone does it in the UK and it is a known donor and they're allowed to do that 18, doesn't mean the outcome's going to be any different. You know, like, so I think it's really easy to bandy about loads of different things when actually everyone's just in the same boat, essentially. And really, I feel like some of that debate is almost a bit of a moot point. I know that I might be very controversial in saying that, but I just feel like it doesn't really matter.
It's so hard, isn't it, to get, because it's obviously such a sensitive area, and everyone has different opinions on it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I recently did, which is coming out soon, a podcast with a sperm donor, which I found fascinating. I couldn't know his name or anything about him, but he was very open about his reasons for donating,
Yeah.
what the process looked like, and his feelings on donor children contacting him. And so it was really interesting to get his perspective and then
Yeah.
have these conversations where we're both parents of donor conceived children. And then equally, I've had so many amazing conversations with donor conceived adults in the community or who've come through various different pieces of content to hear their views on how they feel in terms of if they were told, how they were told, and if they weren't told, how they felt when they found out by accident and that kind of thing. And I think it's so important, isn't it, to just kind of take on board all these little bits and then do what you can with it. Like nobody's perfect and it's impossible to
Absolutely.
get everything right, but just do what you to the best of your knowledge.
And I think that's the thing. I think that's what's so amazing about, you know, everything that you're doing, everything that lots of people in the community are doing to help, like, give that support and that resource and that sort of information to people, because all you can do is arm yourself with all of that sort of stuff. And then how it actually pans out, who knows, you know, like, and you'll get it wrong. You will, because again, you're just human and you won't get it all right and you might make the wrong choice. But more often than not, you're going to make the right one because it's about, you know, your family, and you always do everything with that in mind, don't you? So it's kind of yeah, and I think it's just also other people respecting other people's decisions.
Definitely, definitely. I totally agree. Does anyone have any questions for Keeley about egg donations or feelings around it or the process before we sign off? This is a personal question, but with those embryos remaining, do you think that you would want to try again?
It's in discussion. I really don't know at the moment. I'm just like, I feel like, especially with everything that's happened this year, I just want to enjoy Freddie. He's just like such a bundle of joy, and
waited so long to have him.
Waited so long to have him that, you know, it's really nice to know that there's a possibility.
Yeah.
But I think we're just enjoying being where we are for a change, rather than constantly thinking of the next thing.
Yeah, of course, especially with COVID. And one last question with me, if no one else has any questions. So, because I get asked this question a lot, actually, I did a webinar with a clinic in the Czech Republic about egg donation last week, and a common question that came up was cost. What kind of costs would people be looking at if they were to do egg donation in the UK, maybe versus abroad?
So, I don't really know about the UK, to be honest, because we didn't do a lot of. I know that obviously there are different rules because of it's altruistic here in the UK, so donors only get sort of expenses, as it were, but you pay for treatment, etc. So, but abroad it can range from anything really, from about, I think, 5,000-6,000 euros to 20,000 euros, depending on what packages you decide you want to do, or but I think probably like 6 to 12 is probably like an average, which I know is quite a lot of range, but it just really depends. It really depends on kind of where you go,
and what's included.
So that might include 3 rounds, for instance, or it might include 1. So it is kind of it's a bit how long is a piece of string, which isn't very helpful. But
no, that gives a good idea. But
there was one question, I think.
Did you have any wobbles when you were pregnant?
Yeah, like not massive, but just, again, I think totally natural. And again, I think it wasn't about the fact he was donor conceived. I think it was that thing about actually accepting that I was finally pregnant. And I know, and also because I was very lucky. I had a really smooth pregnancy. I had some early, like first trimester, a bit of nausea and stuff, but nothing, like I wasn't sick and I wasn't whatever, like tired and blah, blah, blah. So sometimes I had to remind myself that I was actually pregnant because it was such alien concept. You know, I would like do something and be like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Like, or you know, or go to order something, you know, I mean, not I really believe in all of that anyway, but you know, you know, I'd go to order sushi and be like, oh no, I can't do it, you know, like, but there wasn't any wobble about the donor aspect of it. I think there was, again, it was kind of just intrigue more than anything. It wasn't. I think probably once I had, you know, being really honest, I think I probably had one of those chats with Dwight who's like, do you think he's gonna love me? You know, like, do you think we'll be all right, or something like that? And Dwight is very good in those situations. He's just like, of course, you know, he just always totally dispels my. But it was probably like an evening. I was probably knackered, you know.
And how did you feel when he was born?
Just, I don't know. It was kind of mind blowing. I had a C-section, so it was kind of even more mind blowing in a way. And he was delivered by a friend of ours, and he was just. I don't know. It was so difficult to. I was like, I thought I'd be like sobbing, you know, like properly, like, oh my God, this is just amazing. And I was crying, but it was almost like, you know, like when you cry and it, like you're not physically crying, but they're just tears that don't stop, kind of thing. It was like that. It was like so much like joy that I was just smiling, and I couldn't. It was almost like I was going to waste time by crying, because I was kind of, you know, I just want to get him. And but I'd like when she handed him over and she was like, here's your little boy, and I was like, oh my God, look, I'm crying out now.
You knew you were having a boy, didn't you?
Yeah,
I think I remember seeing you post something.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we found out at our Harmony test actually at 11 weeks. So yeah, and again, I think that was just a personal choice. I think it was like a bit of control after having not a lot of. I mean, I couldn't change him to a girl, but you know what I mean. Like just having that knowledge, I felt.
Well, that's the same thing actually. I forgot to put touch on that. I'd always said when I was younger, you know, when I have children, which is so naive, I would want to find out the sex. Sorry, I wouldn't want to find out the sex. I'd love to have a surprise. And I'd always said that to my husband when we got married, and he'd always say, well, I'd find out. So we used to joke about it. And then when infertility hit, you know, after going through all of that and then going down the donor route and it working when it worked, I didn't care about finding out. I didn't, all of those kind of magical moments that I thought about earlier on in my life sort of disappeared, and we just wanted to have a healthy child. And so my husband felt like he could probably bond better knowing, especially because he wasn't carrying not our first, them. It was almost like a sense of control and getting to know the situation by finding out that she was a girl.
So I think I felt the same in terms of if I knew the sex, that bonding and that connection, I felt like, because I was already sort of talking to him as a person rather than like, and again, it's totally personal decision. That's just a way that I felt maybe was a way that I could connect more, or not that I wasn't connected, but you know what I mean? Like it made it feel more real, I guess, as well, because it felt so surreal. That knowing the sex helped me. But
and last thing I was going to say, because some people have commented, but I just say watch this back because we've covered those bits earlier, so I don't want to take up more of your time. But it has even happened to us actually at the weekend. My brother-in-law said to me and my husband about one of our children, I can't even remember what they said, something about being tall or something, and then said to my husband, do you think that she gets it from you? And then was like, when he went awkward, not my husband, but he went awkward and was like, oh, I mean, and just sort of like tried to sort of change the question.
Yeah.
And my husband was very cool about it and just like, don't think so. Do you know what I mean? It's just like people forget how the family's built sometimes, and then they say something and then they feel awkward for saying it, and we're okay with that, but it will continue to happen.
It will continue to happen, and I get
you get that too.
And they had that, I had it Christmas. Well, all the time, like, and it's not, it's not because they don't
malicious.
know,
Yeah.
and it's not malicious,
Yeah.
and it's totally unintended. And usually we laugh it off, or like I can't remember, like I think my sister-in-law or something said something, and then I went, well, that would pretty be medically impossible. And she went, oh my God, I just totally forgot. I was like, that's like, and actually that's great, because it shouldn't be at the front of everyone's mind.
Yeah.
Everyone shouldn't be tiptoeing around language. But I think as long as someone says it, and I know someone saying like, how do you like negotiate, like, or how do you explain stuff to older family members? It's just like, it's kind of not making it a big issue, but just maybe and not correcting them in a kind of like,
maybe it's partly education.
it is education. Like my dad gets the terminology round. I mean, he's a bit like that anyway, but he gets all the terminology wrong, like, he's, and again, it's nothing against surrogates, but like he was like, oh yeah, so like the surrogate, no, Dad, like, it's called a donor. He went, oh yeah, that's what I meant. I was like, but you got to get it right, because it's really different, like, and he went, right, yeah. And just by doing that, it's like, and it's about not making them feel uncomfortable, so they don't feel like they can get it wrong, because they will get it wrong. And actually, for especially like older family members, it's quite a hard thing to get your head round, like, and because it's just quite alien to them. Like, it's not something that they would have experienced with their friends, particularly our parents. Like my parents are in their 70s. It's like unheard of, just totally unheard of. So,
but thinking about Donor Conception Awareness Day today, that's another thing that we've been seeing a lot in the community. There's so much discussion about it now, and it's becoming, I mean, obviously more so in the trying to conceive community, but becoming more recognized, and people are talking about it, and people are talking to children about it. And back in the 80s, like in this article B wrote for me, her parents were advised not to tell the children.
Absolutely.
And so I think the shifts are happening, aren't they, in terms of openness and
I
discussion.
think, it's kind of like, I remember, it was kind of, I know this sounds like a real total generalization, but it's like back in the day when, if you were the child of divorced parents in a class, you were seen as quite an anomaly. Like, it was kind of a big deal. And yet, my nephew's in a class with like 2 same-sex couples, like 2 single mums, like like there's such like a total hybrid of families that exist, that it will be that our children, there's probably be someone else in his class, do you know what I mean, that is the same, has been donor conceived in some way, or and that just will be a fact. Like, and it's only going to get, I think, more prevalent for various reasons, and that's great. And that means there's more little special people running around that are kind of amazing. And
you've reminded me, actually, I want to buy some books that are about different kinds of family building as well as just donor sperm conception, because I really want to educate my children that there are so many different routes to parenthood. So that, as you said, it's like normal that families can be made in beautiful different ways.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important. I always say, like, I want Freddie to know he's special, but not in a negative, but without a negative connotation. I'll tell him special all the time, but not because he's different, or because it's just because he came into the world in a very special way. Like, that's,
but also like, without putting too much pressure on them, that they've got to be like perfection because you struggled to have them. And that's one of the things that's coming up from the donor conceived adults that I've spoken to. So I've got that at the back of my mind as well. It's kind of like a checklist of things to consider during this narrative.
I mean, there's so many things to talk about. Like, Becky and I actually talk about this quite a lot, but just to finish on is that whole concept of like how you might have talked about it previously. Like, I always used to joke that, bloody hell, this kid better be amazing because it's cost us like 120 grand. And that is really awful. But it was meant in kind of like in jest, and in kind of like trying to make it the fact that, of course it doesn't matter what is, like, that is irrelevant to the picture. And now I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, I'd never say that now. It just totally shifts. And that's totally fine as well. So
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Keeley. It's been
Thank
so lovely
you.
speaking to you, and thanks to everyone who joined.
Yes,
Speak to you
thanks
soon.
everyone. Speak to you
Okay.
soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.